Vroom vroom is how I promised myself I'd start this episode. Max is cringing. Ben probably didn't hear me. I'm going to say it
Oh, no.
again. Vroom vroom.
Fortunately, I personally would have started with "Get off my lawn."
Yes, everybody take note of Ben's
Only for those that
new
understand
name.
the joke.
So as promised last week, we are back. We are talking about Gran Turismo, the new film from Sony PlayStation, based on a true story. I'm sitting here in my racing cockpit. What'd you guys think?
But you also have to point out that it's a movie by Neil Blomkamp. This is not as a traditional movie, but I thought it was a decent movie. It's not a
You
great
say that
movie.
Joseph Kosinski was supposed to direct this movie. He did Top Gun Maverick. He was supposed to do this movie, and they canned that project and started a new one.
It doesn't matter. I
Anyway,
mean,
go on. Go on.
like Noah Blomkamp is a fantastic director, so it doesn't really matter. I think overall the screenwriting is probably what hampers the movie the most. It is a little like it's an incredible story if you think about it, and I think they get that. The acting is quite good in some parts. David Harbour's probably the highlight, honestly. He's got a good mix of cynicism and then it seems like genuine appreciation and support for this kid. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty solid story. It's just there's nothing exceptional about it. Um, and I would say my one criticism that I learned was that Crash did not happen in this way, which is it happened like 3 years after he's already a professional racer. So I'm not sure that I agree with the choice to turn some guy's life, like the guy that died from that, into a character development point in a movie. That's probably in bad taste.
Yeah,
Um,
that
given also it's just a fucking crazy like idea to begin with, that you actually like succeed as a racer after being a video game player for your entire life. Like that should be enough. You don't need to change history. Um,
Yeah.
but
yeah,
yeah, I
I,
still
I
thought
I
it was
think
a good movie.
that inclusion, and Max, I'll get to you in a second here. We'll get to you in a second here. Excuse me. Um, that choice to include that crash in Germany as sort of the big narrative point of the second act has probably gotten the most criticism
Yeah,
from critics and fans alike, racing fans, Gran Turismo fans, gaming fans, and unqualified film bros, where we get you know one inconsistent historical narrative. It happened years after he went pro, and also I get that you want to motivate your character, but you're making a biographical sports drama film.
you could have done it just a motivational speech or something after he finished like last place or whatever. It's like
Yeah,
you
the
don't
race that he
need to artificially, because to my knowledge, this is actually completely historically accurate in the other places. They chose to do that, and it's just, I mean, that hampers it to me. It doesn't really hurt the story overall. It doesn't really like change my score that much, but it is a criticism I would have.
Max, what do you
Yeah.
got?
I mean, I agree. And Ben, I think you put it in your overall review of the film, put it nicely. It's a good movie, but there's nothing really exceptional about it. Like even David Harbour's performance, I mean, was it a standout? No, but a highlight, sure. Um, I think it was just this was a good film. And I enjoyed it, but it was just like, all right, cool, great story.
There are other films like, I think my favorite racing film is probably Rush, uh,
Rush.
with Ron Howard as the director, and it tells the story of Nicky Lauda and what's his name, Hunt. I almost said Chris Hunt. Not his name.
Ethan Hunt.
James James Hunt.
Hmm.
Um, and Nicky Lauda actually famously had an accident where he burned his entire body on Nürburgring. The same track that this crash happened on. It's famous for killing people, essentially. So yeah, not a great track design. But I mean, that works in that film. They obviously show the crash, they show the recovery because it's his crash and he's the one injured. But I feel like, I mean, that's not editing anything. That's not changing history. That's just authentically how his character develops as a human being in the real world. And it works in that film to an immense degree. Because, I mean, it just a sort of side plot. It's an amazing story what happens in that one as well, which is he basically burns his entire body in that crash, and then he gets in like 30 days after, with the bandages still on his face and everything, and he decides not to race or whatever, I think.
Speaking of that, did anyone else notice the continuity error in the third act? Jan's face for the 24-hour at Le Mans,
Mm-hmm.
0 marks whatsoever from his crash.
Oh,
And that's meant to have taken place not that long ago.
yeah.
Just
Yeah.
from a filmmaking perspective, maybe you shot that earlier, or maybe you just didn't have the makeup person on set that day.
I
But
mean, I wonder
come
if
on, guys.
they just put it. I have no idea. No clue.
Anyway, back to Rush. What were you saying?
Oh, that was bad. It works in that film just because it's his actual story, and also it's more his crash. He's the only one injured, and this one obviously, the driver Jan gets injured, but he kills someone, so it's more guilt. But also, you have less of a license to use that crash how you want, because I know they asked him about the crash to use it, and he said that's fine, but he's not the one that died. So also, you couldn't do a story about Niki Lauda without that crash. That would be impossible. I mean, he was physically disfigured from it, like for the rest of his life. Also, yeah, but if you guys have not watched that film, definitely go see it. It's an incredible film.
It's on the list.
Yeah, it's a great one.
So let's talk about our cast briefly, and I got some fun questions to ask you guys in a couple minutes. But let's talk about Archie Madekwe, who plays Jan. Let's talk about David Harbour, Orlando Bloom. We can even get into like Jimon Honsu and Ginger Spice. But let's start with our leading man. What do you guys think of our portrayal of Jan?
He's good. He's not like we said earlier. I feel like none of the actors are asked to do too much. The only actor that really stood out to me was just David Harbour, because he has a little bit of like more variety in his performance, but
Really, really three-dimensional.
they do what they are asked to, and they do a good job, but that's all it is. I mean, I've seen Jimon Husman play that role like in so many movies. The supportive but not so supportive father, mentor, whatever. It's a little cliched for me, but like, I mean, he does a good job with it. It's just there's no standout performance, so there's not much for me to like comment on.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought it was funny that every time Orlando Bloom opened his mouth and said something, it sounded like he was making a big announcement to like everybody in the room. Like very enthusiastic and everything. It works.
He was very performative.
Yeah.
It doesn't entirely work for me though. Like Madekwe, who plays Jan, I think he is good. Obviously, he's a little greener than Harbour and Bloom when it comes to blockbuster film acting, but he does a good job with the character, I'd say. Orlando Bloom, too many shifts, I think, whether we're supposed to like him, dislike him, when he says that Maddie should be the the choice when there's a
But that's just a
hundredth or a
typical
thousandth.
executive. It's like, flip-flopping all over the place based on the circumstances.
Yeah, and if we weren't introduced to him in that first presentation in Tokyo, where we're so clearly supposed to be rooting for this guy, then the decisions throughout the
I
film to have him sort of be a good guy in the room, but also only caring about marketing and marketability. I felt like especially in his moments playing off of David Harbour, yes, they have chemistry on screen, but we're not getting as much from Bloom as we are from Harbour. Harbour outacts everyone he's in a scene with.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, Orlando Bloom was never known for his like versatility in that regard. He's been acting the same way for a long time, okay? It's just but yeah, in this one he really does go a little bit above where it seems like he's acting like there is a camera on him all the time. It's a little it's too much.
Sort of like
It's uncanny.
sort of like what we see from Gal Gadot in every movie.
Yes. Yeah, he's really embracing his Gal Gadot. Um but yeah, I mean, look, I never trusted that guy. He's smiling all the time, like uncomfortable amount of time.
You never trusted him, Ben.
Smiling.
He looks shifty to you.
Yeah, because he's smiling the entire time.
You gonna
You're
call him
saying
a
that
rascal?
this Will Turner Legolas looking guy is not trustworthy just because he smiles too
Marketing,
much?
marketing for Nissan. They introduce him as a marketing guy.
I mean, you want to talk about the product placement in this movie? It's absurd. It's part of the film, but I'm surprised no one said like, let's make sure the label of the champagne bottle on the podium is facing out.
But I assume
It's a
when
racing film, and that is filled with more sponsorships and corporations than maybe any sport on the planet. But come on, it's egregious. And his character is the personification of that and doesn't really do
yeah.
anything else.
No, I think it's fair though. Like that is an authentic part of the racing circuit. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I There's not really much to go on. Like I feel like I've just seen this character in like 1,000 films. I'm used to it by now. If that makes sense.
Well, there's a reason why you've seen this character in 1,000 films, and that's because every sports story put to film follows basically the same structure. And yes, this film
Yeah.
is heavily cliched. And Ben, you're absolutely right that the screenplay is weak because it delivers a lot of those cliches. But, you know, am I wrong to give this film a pass because it's based on a true story? Yes, we can talk about the crash at Nürburgring, or however you pronounce it. Um, but everything that happens in this story, whether it's the brakes being glazed, happens to get him above the cutoff line, or making his race at his tryout race at the last second, or just barely qualifying with that fourth place finish,
The
or
three photo finishes that they did.
yeah, like
Yeah, that was a montage.
cliches are cliches for a reason, but at the same time, I want to give this movie a pass for putting those cliches in there because that's how it happened.
No, yeah, no, that's not what I meant. I meant like just the character of Orlando Bloom and like Jimon Husman. Like they literally exist in 1,000 different films. And there's nothing to differentiate them in any of those films, including this one, which is fine. But it's hard to talk about their acting ability when, like, I mean, I don't know that even if they acted better, it would make their characters any less two-dimensionally kind of dumb. They basically like the dad and the executive function in the same way. They just sort of flip-flop. And then they're like, they're not sportive, and then they are sportive, and I don't know.
Let's change gears a little bit. I hate that I just said that.
Ooh.
It's a goddamn racing movie. That was completely unintentional. I'm sorry, guys.
Let's shift lanes then.
Let's
Let's change the topic. I think we're clear on that one.
let's
Let's talk about the
conversation.
let's talk about the visuals of this one because I thought that they were, both the cinematography and the visual effects. I thought that they were the probably the best part of the movie.
Yeah, it's I noticed that, and I expected it. Neil Blomkamp is known for his movies with great special effects. District 9, even like movies like Chappie that I don't think are that good. The effects are really, really good. I don't know who he utilized, but I'm sure he knows how to film a movie like this. And especially because his films frequently involve like interacting with, the actual actors and physical world and the CGI that they would use. It works for a movie like this where they sort of try and put the simulation in the actual races and vice versa.
Yeah, every time they
I think it's
construct or deconstruct the car around Jan looked fantastic, which I might not have necessarily expected it to do.
Yeah, and I even like the little details of like having the places, the number places on the cars, even the real races to show like how he's thinking. Um, but yeah, I thought that was probably the best part. And the action sequences, the racing sequences are all, pretty fantastic. I actually think the actual guy, Yan, he did some of the stunt
He was his own stunt performer, yeah.
his own stunt performer. So I mean that's pretty
So
cool.
cool.
And then he's raced like 200 times or something.
I think he's still racing.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Like
And like
I'm not
I honestly have no idea how that like circuit works. I sort of get how F1 works. But it's like this is like Formula 3, I guess.
there's a Formula 3. I know less than nothing about racing professionally.
There's like a bunch of different circuits. I mean, if you think about it, there's 20 racers, right? There's lots of racers. So Formula One, I think only has 20 racers. But there's limited amounts of spots for an international sport like that. So you've got lots of different circuits. I think he raced in Japan a lot. I think that might still be where he's racing. I mean, it makes sense, I guess, going from Nissan. But I don't know his story that well. I have no idea. But Formula 3. But it was just a weird seeing like the budget thing because they do mention that one racer. What's his name? Nick.
Nick.
He's got a bigger budget with his nice car and everything. So I never really understood the budget thing. I guess some of these.
I mean,
I have no idea.
they talked about it, when Orlando Bloom's character was going to recruit David Harbour's character. He talked about, taking racing back from, wealthy pricks like Kappa, I think his name was.
Yeah, to my knowledge, the Formula 3 stuff is like a lot less to do with the cars designed specifically for racing. I don't know the logistics of like what cars are what, but
dare I bring up Iron Man 2 when Tony Stark throws himself in his own, F1 car?
That was F1. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know that that's I mean, I guess you could probably do that.
If he's the team owner,
yeah, I guess you could do that.
I don't see why not. Again, I know nothing about racing, so.
Well, he's also like the owner of the company, probably. The owner of everything.
Orlando Bloom should have driven the car.
Yeah, I know there's like souped up like Honda Civics that they use in one of the Formula 3 circuits. But yeah, that was the idea behind the Formula 3, I think, was like cars that went a little slower, that were more like accessible to people, that didn't cost, millions and millions of dollars to design and whatnot.
Yeah.
So we've talked about Uncharted. We've talked about the Super Mario Bros. Movie. Those are, and you guys gave me shit for this at the end of last week's episode. Those are video game adaptations. This is
Yes.
not a video game
It's
adaptation.
not, no.
This is a biographical film that happens to include a video game as its lens, but it's not, it's about the video game. It's not the video game's story.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
how would you compare this film? And this is a two-parter. How would you compare this film with video game adaptations? And then with something video game based, how would you compare this to other sports dramas?
Um, I mean, compared to a lot of video game adaptations, it's much better. Like, there's an actual story there. I still think the Super Mario Brothers movie is kind of a bad movie. Um, Even though a lot of
Wait,
people
let's check the Letterboxd. What did Ben give
enjoyed
it?
it.
What score? We were looking at this before the episode started.
I
What
actually
score
haven't.
did Benjamin Green give the Super Mario Bros. Movie? 2.5 out of 5. Continue, Ben.
Yes, all right. Yeah, that's accurate score. Um, Uncharted was like okay, but missed a lot of the beats. I feel like when you're doing video game adaptations, it's a lot like anime adaptations. It's hard to always get the characters and scenarios the same in a live action film or just, I mean, doing a film out of something where you have choice to like make choices yourself. The story's not always going to be the same in some of those games. I think this holds up a lot better than those for the most part. I mean, they did do The Last of Us really well on the HBO miniseries. But in terms of like sports biopics, it's hard for me to judge. Like, I think sports biopics, and don't hate me for this, George, they're a little cliche for me. So it really takes a special sports biopic to even make me really, like something. Like Moneyball, I find is interesting. And that's a well done one because it's not like your average sports biopic, like, the up and coming guy or the underdog, has to overcome this journey and then they win at the end and everyone's happy. It's much more like there's lots of pieces moving. Also includes a appearance by Joe Satriani, who is one of my favorite guitarists as a kid. If you don't know, he's the guy playing the guitar in the movie.
National anthem guy, yeah.
Um,
Great cover.
but I feel like there's a lot better sports biopics. There's also a lot worse. But there are a lot better ones that I would think of first that don't really, this movie can't really compare. It's a good movie, not a great movie.
Max, what do you think?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's hard to could be. I think that's why it's hard to talk about this one because like there isn't that one thing that you can really grab onto and be like, we can talk about this for 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
It's just is like, okay, this was a good movie. It was an interesting story. It had some flaws, but that was kind of expected. Um, so yeah, like go see it. I mean, it's fun.
Yeah, it is entertaining. Certainly a good time. So I would recommend it.
Yeah, it's worth the price of admission. Certainly less expensive than going to see an actual car race.
Like
And
go see this over Strays. Go see this over the
with
Meg. Like,
much of a less of a chance of death as a bystander. So
hmm.
Um, so Ben, I 100% agree with you in terms of its status compared with video game adaptations. Um, I think, sort of blending the ideas of a video game adaptation where it's someone playing the game but then doing it in real life, making a video game film and a sports film sort of one and coalescing into one idea felt really fresh. I haven't seen that done in a while, and maybe just an obvious example is slipping my mind right now. Perhaps you guys can help me realize what that might be. But yeah, I mean, it's an entertaining 2 hours and 15 minutes. When I saw that runtime, I thought it might be bloated. It doesn't feel bloated, except maybe a little bit in the second act. But the energy is kept up. It's cut together really well. We get a film that's for 2 hours, 15 minutes, pretty tight. So,
I was
question
just
for you both.
all right.
Let's say you are very skilled at a video game and you get offered the chance to do that video game's activity in the real world. What game is it?
I mean, I play League of Legends, so I don't want to do that in the real world. I can't. That's not possible for me. Um, for those that don't know, you just choose a champion. So I guess I would be the champion, and you fight to the death and just forever, I guess. That no, that sounds like a prison.
I
I
both
don't.
I
I
both
nominate Ben for
regret
that.
I both regret asking and love that I asked that question.
Ben can go do that. Thanks for
Really,
sharing,
like think
buddy.
about. I feel like most of the games, if you're playing like Call of Duty, it's like okay, you go to war, you get drafted. Fortnite, I guess it's more fun war, but you still get shot at. And then all of a sudden, Thanos comes out of the sky with the Infinity Gauntlet and blasts your ass.
No, and then he starts twerking.
Yeah, and then he starts twerking on your corpse. I mean, these are punishments that I wouldn't wish on the worst people. So the
Maybe I didn't
answer
think that
is
question through.
no. You mostly know.
I play a lot of Wii, so my job would be
Give me a
Wii.
lot of money.
Um,
What was that,
no,
Max?
I don't know. What?
What are you saying?
Oh, I play a lot of Wii, so my job would be animated me for Wii Sports. Um, I don't
What would you do if you were like The Sims? I mean, would you be one of the Sims or would you be God in real life and just pick people up and like,
Whoa.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Good question.
these are things that need to be answered.
I think
I think it'd be like
it would be like
Jumanji.
I think it would be like the Matrix. I think you would just
Um,
be living in the simulation.
That would, I guess so, yeah. That would be terrible. You're just walking around, like, going to grab some coffee, and then all of a sudden, the hand of God picks you up and drops you in like the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
Just for fun.
Yeah. You're screaming for help, and they're just laughing.
Yeah, I guess that question really only applies to like if you play MLB The Show or FIFA or Madden and you get a chance to go pro in one of those sports.
Yeah,
Because that's what happens in this movie. Jan has been a gamer his entire life. His dad's pushing him to, find a direction. Doesn't think that racing cars is realistic.
I feel like the difference is that FIFA, Madden, any of those games are completely I have nothing to do with anything in the actual sports. You need physicality, you need to learn to like actually be there in person. The vision's all different. There's nothing like comparable. I mean, you would know some of the plays, I guess.
Oh, the whole training montage at GT Academy, we're talking about strength training, conditioning,
That's not what I
dealing
mean.
with like
Like
Jeeps. I mean,
the,
whether or not you think that car racing
no,
is
no,
a
no, but
sport, it's these are athletes that we're talking about.
yeah, well, actually, these people are probably in better shape than the actual people that did this. They looked to be in actual, physical shape, which is uncommon for a lot of gamers. But yeah, I don't think that there's a lot in common. Like, the plays. Let's just take Madden, for example. It's like, all right, so you play quarterback, you play defense. A lot of people don't even know the different, like, plays you can run, what your job would be, being an individual on one of those teams. I mean, also, yeah, all those are like team sports, so you control every player, not just one player. You would have the vision difference of like actually being there. I mean, Gran Turismo worked because it's a simulation. It really is. Like, everything is the same. The tracks are meticulously created. That is the fidelity of the game is the selling point for the game.
Yeah,
The point for those other sports games is just to play with your favorite team and take them to the Super Bowl or whatever. It's like, it's fun to be able to play it, but there aren't a lot of skills that have passed on, which is a very technical answer for your completely hypothetical question. But
no, it's good. That was good, a good answer. Should have gotten Chip in here to give us some readouts of those football plays you were talking about.
yeah, yeah, we'd start talking about X's and O's. Like, lots of people who watch football and know like different stuff. I mean, we watch football. I don't think any of us have any idea what Chip is saying half the time when he starts talking about different plays. It's like, unless you actually played, and even if you did, I don't know that you like would think like that. But that's what is required in an actual professional setting. It's just a different set of skills versus a Gran Turismo. It's a simulator, so it's very close. That was the whole idea with this project. So I don't know that, it's tough to find something else that's like comparable to that. You'd have to find another simulator. And actually, I mean, they do use simulators to train people in like the army and military. I mean, it's the same idea, which is if you get something that is incredibly similar to what you're going to be operating with, or flight sims or whatever, everything is meticulously crafted so that you have to do everything in a simulator that you'd have to do in real life. Most sports games, EA is not doing that. They're much too preoccupied with selling you some junk.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that you brought up that I really liked about this movie was not only the opening sequence, and the credit sequence where we sort of see how the game is made and how it's sort of developed to be as faithful to real life as possible, you know, making the simulation as true to life as it can possibly be. But I think the way that, that sort of plays into Jan's arc throughout the film really, drives that home that this is unlike anything else, in terms of, you know, crossing the line from gaming to racing.
Mm-hmm.
And you see it in his success. It's not just like the process of him picking up these skills and establishing himself in the racing community. It's that he actually started to like do well and race really well.
I mean,
And
I saw he has at least one win.
yeah,
I mean, it's impressive. Like, it's really tough to podium and to win in that sport. It is, you have to be the top three or whatever. I think it's top three.
Top three to podium, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's impressive to stay in the sport for that long, given your background, and succeed. It's a tough sport, really, really tough, and the physicality is something that they, I think, do a pretty good job explaining, at least. It's very, very tough on your body, but that again, that's like the different like strength training and stuff. You would never be able to turn someone into like a football ready like physical specimen, but you could train someone to take on G forces and stuff. They do that all the time for astronauts. They train and keep themselves in good shapes, but it's a different like level of physicality needed.
I mean, as long as you've got enough Kenny G and Enya to calm you down in the middle.
I can't believe that the kid got hyped to Kenny G, the songbird.
This film, more than any film I've ever seen, and I'm ready to make that claim, having seen almost 1,000 movies in my life. used the soundtrack is in the headphones, pull it off and you can hear it through the headphones. This film used that, I want to say at least 70 times.
They did do it a
Um,
lot.
it was
A
like
lot.
it was like 5 or 6 times, but
I have to
you
imagine
see
that
it once and then the bit is old.
I have to imagine that this was an actual like point from his life that he loved these songs and that
Definitely.
maybe it would happen, which is the only reason that I could think to put that in. Or that he just said like, yeah, I get pumped up to Enya and Songbird by Kenny G, and they're like, what? That's hilarious, and they had put it in the movie like 1,000 times.
I think it would be so much funnier if they made that up for his character.
The movie, it's like, what the fuck, guys? I listen to Black Sabbath.
Goes to see the movie. What am I listening to here?
Or maybe they flipped it. Maybe David Harbour actually liked to listen to Kenny G and Enya, and they flipped it, and so the only real scene was him playing at Le Mans to get him hyped up. That was the only real scene of him being angry because he hated it.
Could have been. I want to know how much driving the actor who played Jan actually did.
That's a good question.
Because you know that the real Jan, we said it earlier, was the stunt performer for that role. But like
I
the
would
actor has
imagine
to be in the car.
I would imagine very little. But they also could do the trick where they have him in the passenger seat and have the stunt driver in the actually driving the car, but with like a dummy wheel. That's something they could have done, but I'd imagine most of the driving is done at least by
Should have been
Yan,
done by professionals.
because you can't drive that fast and not be a professional. Because that was
Tell that to the amateurs at GT Academy, Ben.
oh my god. But that was actually like, people on the road together. So I'd imagine they wanted to make sure their actor was not going to die on them.
It's a good strategy.
Yeah.
That's
Unlike
why that's why
William,
Tom Cruise does all the Mission Impossible, the biggest stunts first.
yeah, because if he dies, there's no reason to make the rest of the film.
Also, speaking of Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible, shout out to Lorne Balfe. Did the score of Dead Reckoning Part 1, did the score of Gran Turismo. The
Wow.
music in this film really it sang. It was good. I liked it.
I
Played up the energy of the film. I thought that was, I don't often talk about the score on this podcast as much as I would like to, but I think, it was a highlight here. Right? We're not using the word standout for anything about this film, but highlight works.
okay. Yeah, sure.
Sure.
All right.
Uh,
Gran Turismo is playing in theaters. We all liked it. It's a good film.
yeah, it's
It's
entertaining.
it's worth the watch. I would say see it on a big screen. You know, the visuals, cinematography, shot selection, it's all worth it. Um, but you could also wait for streaming. That's your prerogative. That's your choice. Max, what are we doing next week?
We are going to be doing Arrival. Since Ben doesn't get his Denis fix this year, we're gonna remedy that next week.
Cool.
I'm gonna arrive during it.
Max, for his victory in Funky Films 5 MCU edition, gets to talk about Arrival. So we will be bringing that to you next Friday. In the meantime, have your pets spayed or neutered. Good
Yeah.
night, everyone.
Yeah.
Good night.